Welcome to today's edition of the Author's Corner, brought to you by KNEO 91.7 FM The Word. This is Roberta Foster. And today I welcome Mark Vroegop to Author's Corner, and he has written the book, Waiting Isn't a Waste, The Surprising Comfort of Trusting God in the Uncertainties of Life. It's published by Crossway, and he'll tell you more about how to find the book at the end of the program. Let me tell you a little bit about Mark. He is the lead pastor of College Park Church in Indianapolis and the author of the ECPA 2020 Christian Book of the Year, Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy, Discovering the Grace of Lament. And so, Mark, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, waiting is definitely not something that a lot of people like to do, but through your book, you share with us how it's common to humanity, but actually vital for our Christian faith. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, to be a Christian is to wait. Like right now, we're waiting for the second coming of Jesus, right? And if you look throughout the Bible, most characters in the Bible had some kind of waiting. Mm-hmm. Abraham, Moses, Joseph, Paul, Peter, Jesus. Think of the gap between Good Friday and Easter Sunday. Mm-hmm. There's a space where God intentionally built into his program a pretty rough day or so with the disciples thinking, oh, we are in big trouble, and yet they were just in that gap moment. And then you have verses in the Bible that have unbelievable promises, like those who wait on the Lord will renew their strengths, and God works for those who wait for him. So I argue in the book that waiting isn't just something that happens to us. It's not just something to be tolerated. It's actually central to what it means to be a follower of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. And so you also talk about three main reactions or emotions that most people have while waiting. Share that with us.
Yeah. Well, most of us don't like waiting, right? Yeah. So it's not something that we enjoy. And when it comes, because it pushes our control buttons, we tend to try to get control again by embracing anger, anxiety, and apathy. And I'm sure there's many more, but those are the three that I'm most familiar with, because those are the three that tend to show up in one way or another when I'm malfunctioning in my desire to wait. Anger is my attempt to get control of the situation by doing something, even if it's rash or unhelpful. Anxiety, overthinking, and just ruminating about how can I figure this out. Or apathy is just an emotional posture of I don't care anymore, so I'm not going to be disappointed by hoping that something's going to change. And so each of those tend to be a reaction that we could embrace when waiting isn't going well.
Well, there is a difference between waiting and just not caring. Some people have a personality where they are not very driven, and so maybe their waiting on something is maybe not the right attitude, that they need to actually be more concerned about things.
Yeah, that's very possible. I come at the book not from a passive perspective, or I come at it from personality-wise. I'm more of a driven, let's get it done kind of a guy. And I'm sure that there's another angle to that, which is, sometimes in our passivity, we embrace that posture, not just because of a personality, but rather a fear of getting hurt or of just being disappointed. I love what the Book of Lamentations says in the Message. In Lamentations, it says, I will never forget this awful time, but even still I will dare to hope. And one of the most frightening things is to hope that your life or circumstance is going to change, and waiting causes us to wonder, is anything ever going to change, and when is that going to happen? And so a defense mechanism we can use is to just act like or say or maybe take the position of I just don't care. But I think often we do. It's just another way of us to maybe try and regain some level of control or emotional protection.
For people that have difficulties come into their life and things don't change very fast, is the waiting process something that God uses to draw us closer to him? Yes.
In fact, that's why he's built waiting into the whole experience of humanity. I mean, imagine what would happen to us if we got everything we wanted in the timing that we wanted it. It would be, we would be God in that situation. So waiting is actually a regular reminder that I'm not omniscient, I'm not omnipotent, and I'm not omnipresent, and I'm not omnipowerful. I'm not omnipotent. I have limits. And so in the book, I define biblical waiting as learning to live on what I know to be true about God when I don't know what's true about my life. So living on what I know to be true about God, who He is, what He's like, when I don't know what's true about my life. So God designs gaps in order to remind us that He actually is God, and He's good. He can be trusted.
Well, in your book, you talk about mapping God's faithfulness. Is that kind of similar to what you were just talking about, or a totally different concept?
It's an application of that concept. So if I'm going to learn to live on what's true about God, and when I don't know what's true about my life, one of the things that we can do is to remember and rehearse when have we seen God to be true in our lives, and where He's proven Himself to be faithful. Because looking back at my life, and I'm sure you have this, you can see seasons when it was really hard to wait. And now, with some distance and time, you can realize, you know what, that was hard, but God was still good. And it helps us to be reminded that waiting was totally worth it. And God met with us and helped us, because in the moment, it can feel like there's no point to our waiting. But with a little bit of perspective, we actually can get, I think, a more accurate appraisal of the value of these gap moments.
Well, today I am talking with Mark Vroegop, and he has written the book, Waiting Isn't a Waste, The Surprising Comfort of Trusting God in the Uncertainties of Life, and it's published by Crossway. You're listening to Author's Corner, and I'm Roberta Foster. So in the book, Mark, you explore what it means to wait on God through 6 important characteristics. And so can you share those with us?
Absolutely. You know, waiting is common to all of our experience, and it's something that we have to deal with on a regular basis. And I describe them as waiting it's got a lot of layers. Things like, waiting is hard, waiting is common, waiting is biblical. It's all over the Bible. Waiting is slow. We're to wait patiently for the Lord. Waiting is commanded. It's not just something that happens to us. God actually commands us to wait. And then waiting is relational. We're to do it in community, but helping one another in our waiting.
Which of those do you think people have the most difficulty with?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. I'll just tell you what mine is. Mine would be waiting is slow. One of my beautiful discoveries in this book writing process was realizing that Psalm 40, one of my favorite texts, I waited patiently for the Lord. But in the original Hebrew, there's no word patient. Instead, it's just a repetition of the word wait. So like Eugene Peterson in The Message renders it, I waited and waited and waited for the Lord. And I just found great value and delight in realizing that part of my problem with how much I don't like waiting is because I have expectations about how long something is going to take. And waiting patiently is simply adding a longer time horizon than what I would have expected. So if I can yield my expectations, or even better, if I can identify them up front and give them to the Lord before a situation happens, actually helps us in our waiting.
So is there ever a time that being frustrated or disappointed about waiting is a good thing?
Well, I think that's understandable. I just was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about the subject of infertility. And, your kids are good. Kids are great. They're gifts. And if you're a married couple and you want to have a baby and it's not happening, it's understandable that there would be frustration and disappointment, and even wrestling with feelings of anger. Like, why is this happening? And, I've written an earlier book on grief and lament, and lament is the language that God's people use when they encounter grief because of their waiting. So lament and grief kind of go together. Lament and waiting can also go together when you've had a good thing that, for whatever reason, God has not allowed you to possess. And that's hard. I think being frustrated and disappointed is really understandable, because the things that we're longing for, so many of them are really good.
Obviously, waiting is something we all have to face. And so how do we turn our waiting from something passive into something active and intentional and beneficial to us?
I developed an acronym of 4 key words with the word FAST. Mm-hmm. So focus, adore, seek, and trust. And I take this out of one of the Psalms, where I think when we're in a season of waiting, the first thing we need to do is to change our focus from what's not true to what do I know to be true. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what's going to happen with this medical diagnosis. I don't know what's happening with my friend. I don't know why someone hasn't responded. But I can know that God is my shepherd, that he's my light, he's my salvation. There's a lot that I can know about God. Secondly, adore, to turn that gap moment into an opportunity for worship and to bask in the beauty of who God is, remind myself and worship that he's in control. Seek, to ask him for help. God, come into this gap. Give me what I need. Help me. And then trust. God, I know that I can trust you even in these moments of uncertainty. So I found that to be helpful. Focus, adore, seek, and trust. Instead of maybe using the traditional prayer form of, adoration, confession, thanksgiving, supplication, like that Acts model, I think fast might be something that we would consider when we have to wait. Focus, adore, seek, and trust.
Absolutely. How does our expectations for maybe a desired result, just our expectations, can that have an effect upon how we wait?
Yes, I think expectations are a big problem when it comes to waiting, because we have, things that we would normally believe would happen, or we have a timeline that we thought that something was going to be brought to a resolution by, or an expectation of what our life was going to be like. And I think many of us, myself included, live with unspoken, unarticulated, maybe even unrealized expectations. And I think if we can walk into situations in life realizing, hey, what are my expectations, and let me pray through them, it actually helps us to anticipate that my timeline isn't ultimate, and I need to even release the timing of this to the Lord. We're often surprised by waiting, and the reason we're surprised or even really disappointed is I don't think we've wrestled with our expectations and why we have them.
Mm-hmm. I've heard it said that sometimes we have to wait because we have to allow God time to get the answer accomplished. Now, we recognize that God is timeless, but at the same time, in our life, things still have to come together. How do we allow God the time to get these things accomplished with a Christian attitude?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And when we start to embrace waiting, not just as something that happens to us, but something that we do intentionally, it's amazing how God does amazing work. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Bible tells us that God works for those who wait for him. Mm. So the idea is, I need to give God some space to do what he does.
Yeah.
I need to give him some space for him to accomplish his purpose. And, and I've seen that happen. And so I've actually started slowing down, building gaps into even some decision-making process, because God does a lot better job at being God of the universe than I do. And I just need to let him have some space in my sort of rapid desire to get things done so that he can do his work. Because, wow, he does his work a lot better than what I would.
So leave us with a word of wisdom about waiting.
Yeah, I'll go back to my original thesis, which is this. Waiting is learning to live on what I know to be true about God when I don't know what's true about my life. And what that means when I'm in a situation and I'm just like, I don't know what's going on right now. And that's true, you don't. But there's a lot that you know about God. And so we welcome the character of God into the chaos of our waiting. And so, again, learning to live on what I know to be true about God when I don't know what's true about my life.
Fantastic. So today I've been talking with Mark Vroegop about his book, Waiting Isn't a Waste, The Surprising Comfort of Trusting God in the Uncertainties of Life. So Mark, how can people find out more about this book and your ministry?
Yeah, awesome. They can go to Amazon, and all the books are there. Also, you can go to crossway.org. Our church's website here is yourchurch.com, and that has a bunch of resources about our church and sermons and ministry and things of that sort. So those would be the primary places.
So one more time, the book is Waiting Isn't a Waste, The Surprising Comfort of Trusting God in the Uncertainties of Life. We've been talking with Mark Vroegop, and we do thank Crossway for giving us a copy of the book. And Mark, it's been a real pleasure and insightful to talk with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on.
And if you missed any part of today's interview or would like to hear it again, you can now find it on your favorite podcast platform or through kneo.org. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. This is Roberta Foster on the Author's Corner. Join me again next time.